Modular has open-sourced Mojo, not just the standard library, the compiler, the toolchain, the full source tree, released under Apache 2.0. For a language that spent nearly 3 years behind a proprietary compiler, that is a structural change, not a press release. But the second half of the announcement matters more, and it got less attention. Mojo is no longer being marketed as a superset of Python. According to Modular's own documentation, it is now a standalone language that borrows Python's syntax, built for GPUs, not for running your existing Python files. That reframing changes who should care. Context matters here, because the people involved have a track record. Modular was co-founded in January 2022 by Chris Lattner and Tim Davis. Lattner created vLLM as a graduate project, built Clang, designed Swift at Apple, and later led infrastructure work at Google, where he co-created MLIR, the compiler intermediate representation that Mojo is built on top of. Davis came from Google's machine learning product organization. Mojo was unveiled publicly on May 2, 2023. The pitch was blunt: Python's ergonomics, C-level performance, and a path off NVIDIA's proprietary stack. Modular reported raising roughly $250 million in September 2025, at a valuation reported near $1.6 billion. The original framing was aggressive. Mojo would become a superset of Python, meaning any valid Python program would eventually be a valid Mojo program, and you could migrate a codebase file by file. That promise did a lot of marketing work. It also created an obligation Modular has now walked back. Current documentation describes Mojo as a member of the Python family rather than a superset. Interoperability with CPython remains. You can call Python libraries from Mojo, but the ambition of full-source compatibility is no longer the organizing goal. If confirmed as permanent, that is a strategic narrowing, not a retreat. The target is now GPU kernel authorship. Be precise about the scope, because partial open sourcing has happened before. In March 2024, Modular released the Mojo standard library under Apache 2.0 with vLLM exceptions. The compiler itself stayed closed. Developers could read the library, file patches, and use the toolchain for free, but they could not fork the thing that mattered. That gap is what has now closed. The compiler front end, the MLIR-based lowering pipeline, and the toolchain are in the open repository. The practical test is simple. Can a third party build the compiler from source, modify code generation, and ship the result? Under Apache 2.0, yes. Apache 2.0 is not a symbolic gesture. It carries specific legal consequences. It is permissive, no copyleft, no obligation to open source derivative work. It includes an express patent grant from contributors, with a termination clause if you sue over those patents. For a company shipping compiled binaries into enterprise environments, that patent language is often the deciding factor over MIT or BSD. What it does not grant is trademark. The Mojo name and branding remain Modular's. The prior arrangement, free use under a company-controlled license, left an unquantifiable risk. The terms could change. Apache 2.0 removes that lever permanently for code already released. Now the hard question: what is Mojo actually competing against? For AI inference today, the default is Python orchestration over CUDA kernels, PyTorch on top, hand-written CUDA C++ or OpenAI's Triton underneath, with vLLM or SGLang handling serving. That stack is mature, heavily documented, and staffed by tens of thousands of engineers. Its weakness is vendor lock-in and the two-language problem. Performance-critical code lives in a different language from the code that calls it. Debugging crosses that boundary constantly. Mojo's argument is that one language spans both layers and compiles to NVIDIA, AMD, and Apple Silicon targets. Modular has published benchmarks claiming competitive or superior throughput against established serving engines on specific models and hardware. Those are vendor benchmarks. They should be read as claims, not findings, until independently reproduced across workloads the vendor did not select. The more durable argument is portability. If a kernel written once genuinely performs well on both NVIDIA Blackwell and AMD's MI series parts, that has strategic value to anyone negotiating compute contracts, which is most of the industry right now. Whether that holds under production load, at the tail latencies that actually matter for agent infrastructure, is not yet settled by public evidence. Most people should not switch. That needs saying plainly. If you are building agent infrastructure in Python, calling hosted model APIs, and never touching a kernel, Mojo solves a problem you do not have. The genuine candidates are narrower. Teams writing custom CUDA kernels who resent maintaining two languages. Inference engine builders who want AMD as a real fallback, not a checkbox. Companies whose compute bill is large enough that a 15% throughput gain justifies retraining engineers. Against that, a small package ecosystem, a language still evolving, and hiring pools measured in hundreds, not hundreds of thousands. Step back from the language itself. A well-funded company just gave away the compiler it spent 3 years building and repositioned its product away from the promise that generated its early attention. Both moves point the same direction. Modular's business is the platform and enterprise support, not the language. That is the standard playbook. LLVM, Kubernetes, and Swift all followed versions of it. Adoption first, monetization at the layer above. Whether Mojo becomes infrastructure or a footnote depends on the next 18 months of independent benchmarks and third-party contributions. The license, at least, is no longer the obstacle.